Hello folks, I hope you're having a great day today. Today I'm going to take a look at Xeethra by Clark Ashton Smith. It's the second to the last of his first book of stories that's set in the world of Zothique. So let's take a look kind of where I'm going with this and so forth. I've been doing this series for you where I've been taking a look at the next short story in this cycle. Clark Ashton Smith was a famous writer during the pulp era, although he's not read as much today. And that's unfortunate because this guy's a great writer. He can really write some stories and such. He really wrote most of his prose from 30 to 35. A few stories came earlier or later. He was really more of a poet who also wrote some prose poetry. He did some plays, stuff like that. He also did lots of sculpture, big into sculpture. So he's more of an artist than he was a writer. And his writing style is very, very different from other fantasy writers and other pulp writers that are writing during this time. He was heavily popular. He was really more of a world craftsman than he was a big writer of peoples, of characters and so forth. He doesn't have these big signature characters like Robert E. Howard's Conan, nor does he have, or H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu, or something like that. Instead, he has these big giant worlds. And what he wants to do in each of these world cycles that he's setting his various stories in is to get a chance to explore the world that he has created. That's what he loves doing. So he doesn't have the same characters, the same settings in those worlds, or anything like that. So what we're going to be taking a look at is the work Xeethra. It's the second to the last, so it's the penultimate story in his first section of the Zothique works. Now Zothique is a world that's kind of a dying world. It's set in the far future when magic has come back and so forth. Here on Earth, the old gods have returned. Everybody's kind of out for themselves and so forth because the end is coming, and they're on this final continent of Earth called Zothique, before it finally settles beneath the stage. The sun is old and oftentimes not even shining, and light's coming from other sources, and so forth. So that's kind of the world that it's set in. And again, Clark Ashton Smith is going to be writing a number of these sort of stories that are set in the Zothique world, in different places, in different locations. In the continent of Zothique, they're going to be in the islands. There's going to be on different islands, from Isle of the Torturers to the Voyage of King Yvorin, and so forth. So the next word we're going to be looking at is Xeethra, and I've been going through these in the order that he wrote him. Now the last one of the book one is the last hieroglyph, which we'll look at next. In fact, as soon as I finish recording this, I'm actually just going to go ahead and grab that. Now, he has a number of collections out there. This one is a Penguin Classic, and it has just a collection of things that he wrote during his time. It's got poems, it's got prose poems in it, and it's also got less than 20 of his short stories that he wrote. He wrote a lot of short stories, even though he only wrote for about a good 5 or 6 years. But this one has both the short stories that we're going to be looking at, Xeethra and the Last Hieroglyph. I'll link you to his Amazon collection below, as well as to one of his general Zothique collections below over on Amazon, so you can take a look at them if you're more interested in it. But we'll be taking a look at this one kind of today and such. Now, again, Xeethra is basically the story of a young character who's a goatherd out in the wilderness near the desert. And while he's tending goats one day, his goats find this amazing, rich, it's been far into the summer, but this really rich pasture and so forth that he'd never seen before. It's hidden kind of in these rocks and crags. So he follows that over, and he knows that because it's such rich grass, his goats aren't going to really sort of leave because they're going to want to eat this nice grass and so forth. So he knows his goats aren't going to need tending once he gets them to that place. They'll stay there to themselves for a while. So he goes in to explore because he hadn't been here before or seen this area before and such. So he's going to spend the first few pages of the story sort of exploring the area and so forth. He's going to see this cave. He's going to go exploring into it. There's going to be this entrance to this dark area, and basically what's going to end up happening, he's going to find this land that's kind of hidden, in kind of almost a hidden valley that's hidden in this just giant mountain chain, and so forth. And in it is going to be all these rich wonders and these giant trees, giant monsters that are tending them, and so forth. And on these trees are growing these big giant fruits. And because he's hungry, and because this is near the end of the world, and everybody's out for themselves, and so forth. What does he do? What does Xeethra do? He grabs one of the fruits from the tree and he eats it because he's hungry and so forth. And he takes a couple more with him, which he'll take back home. Kind of shows his adopted dad what he was doing and so forth, because he's going to be bringing out the goats late, and he knows he would otherwise get a beating if he didn't have a real reason. So he comes back late. It's after hours. Much more time has passed. He starts to think of memories of himself as another person, but these are just flashbacks and so forth. But he comes back to his regular person. But by the time he gets to the cottage, he now doesn't think of himself as Xeethra. Instead, he thinks of himself as this king of this lost of this kingdom in in another location in Zothique, he starts to believe that he is actually this king. When he tells his adopted dad the story of what he found and so forth, the adopted dad tells him that some previous people generations ago had gone crazy after reading a fruit and so forth, and so he thinks that that's happening to his son now, and thus by the end of the story, that night and the following morning, that son's going to set out for his kingdom because he believes he's now the king. He's no longer Xeethra. In fact, he will rarely remember that he actually is, in fact, Xeethra, and most of the rest of the journey. And then what we're going to do is we're going to join him on his journey throughout the rest of the Zothique place until he finds the place that he's actually the king of. That's basically the story in a nutshell. And again, it's a short story. I'm not going to spend too much time with their overview because it's like 15 pages long. Clark Ashton Smith is very good about getting you into and out of a short story. You oftentimes will skip the first act entirely. I've used this as an example before, but in The Isle of the Torturers, which is earlier in this series, Clark Ashton Smith was like one of the first stories he wrote, will actually start on the first page in a city-state that has just died, where everybody has died of a disease except for one person. And so most writers probably would, if they were going to explore that in a short story form, they would wait until you got used to the characters in the city, the location, and so forth. But he doesn't, and then 6 or 7 pages, 10, 15 pages in, once you've gotten invested in the story, the characters, and the setting, then they would kill everybody, and then you would have your one person left, who would then be your person moving forward. But he doesn't do that. He isn't that first act. He's going to start with the second act and move on. So if Clark Ashton Smith writes 15 pages, it's 15 pages that the story required to have, because he's very good about not adding fluff to his story. He can be a little purpley with his prose sometimes, but he also, because he read, he had an eidetic memory, so he could remember anything he read. He actually read a dictionary. He read when he was a kid, encyclopedias and such. So he has this sort of vocabulary that's unusual that other people haven't used and so forth. And much of his prose has sort of this poetic feel to it, the sort of lyrical quality to a lot of it. And again, it can be a little purpley, but during the pulp era, that was considered a good thing, not a bad thing, and such. So we'll take a look at that later on. But again, he's a strong writer for those reasons. Now he wrote these various stories. This was his most popular place he loved, going back to Zothique. The next story, The Last Hieroglyph, is actually the final story he wrote in Zothique, and he concluded it and thinking that The Last Hieroglyph would be good. That's it. But then he loved it so much he just kept coming back to it again and again and again. That's why I call it kind of a lot. This is the penultimate story of book 1, kind of and so forth. But it's a travel story. There aren't a whole lot of these travel stories. There's only one other one, the Voyage of King Evorin, where this king is chasing he had this crown that he had been big in his family, and so forth. The crown was actually made of a long dead stuffed bird. He anointed a necromancer, so the necromancer animated his crown, and it flew away. And so now he's chasing it by sailing from island to island to island to island, further and further east. Well, so it's literally a voyage. Well, Xeethra is probably the second and last voyage of the sort of stories in the first book, in a sort of traditional tale, as the character of Xeethra, who no longer thinks he's Xeethra, is going to move across, trying to find his kingdom, where he's the lost king of, and so he's going to return to that place, and so forth. Now, I do think that the surprise ending isn't that much of a surprise. I do think it's fairly obvious where we're going with it, so I'm not going to play any spoilers with that and so forth. And I think that's actually fairly similar to a previous story, but typically Clark Ashton Smith, this is going to be a little bit harder of telegraph. I think The Isle of Torturers was probably the only other example of a twist in Zothique where, when I read the story the first time, I kind of saw where the story was going as the reader. I don't think it was as hidden, the surprise writing as it was, as most of the other things are, but I think that one was. I think this one's another one, Xeethra. But anyway, that's Xeethra for you. It gets 15 pages. It won't take you that long to read. If it takes you an hour to read, I would be shocked. It's going to take you less than that, even with Clark Ashton Smith's dense writing style, and a very different one. Although once you get used to it, you can read it pretty quickly. So that's Clark Ashton Smith's Xeethra. Have you read it? What did you think? I'd be happy to engage with you more. Clark Ashton Smith, unfortunately, was a writer who I don't think is as well known today as he should be. I'll link you to a video I've done before about why I think that's the case, and I'll make my case for the reason why. Basically, I think he was mispublished after he stopped writing his stuff, and it's hard to find his stuff today in an easily digestible form, and a cheap one too. And you'll see that actually when I link you to the Zothique collection, the only Zothique collections on Amazon that have all of his Zothique stories are huge amounts of money. Then I'll give you an example of that on the secondary market, or how much is, or they're in these giant, you know, high quality volumes that cost a lot of money to pick up. So, but I'll link you to that video later on down in the comments below. Hey, if you watch this video, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day. We all have busy days and busy lives. So the fact that you took some time out of your day to spend it with me, that's very humbling, so thanks. Also, if you watch this video and you liked it, feel free to hit the subscribe button. I really like to focus on fantasy, science fiction, and horror works that I think are classics and mostly have been forgotten, or that people have heard about but have not challenged themselves to go read, like Jack Vance's Dying Earth series. Clark Ashton Smith is a perfect example because he's written in all three of those genres, and he's also somebody who is remembered as this strong writer who a lot of people today just have not read or heard of. So this is Clark Ashton Smith for you in Xeethra. And again, I'd love to talk more about it in the comments below if you have any other questions or so forth. But once again, thanks for your time, and you have a good one.